Ocho sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda pelge drolor zambe zeparche palden lame shabla solvade Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Monisha Sanekar Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Monisha Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Monisha Sanekar Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Monisha Sanekar Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Monisha Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Sumati Monisha Sane Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tugdan Dagi Yi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Lu Makyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tugdan Dagi Yi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Lu Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Sashipu ki choshiameto Tamare Ravalingashi Nide Gempadi Sange Shintu Mikte Ulvarki Drokunu Namandashinglan Chöpar Shoye Damang Guru Radna Mindrala Kam Niryatayami Sange Chedan Tsoge Chonam Lai Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chinso Gibe Sonam Ki drola pinchira sangye drupar sho sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupar sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapso chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye druparesho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo yal haye ke da ludane jike drubundana mi kenam da drubagunge ranam chizamba tamje ke tu dagi cheten to tamje ke tu dagi cheten. Spesso,
Often, when there are moments like today,
per quanto magari possa sembrare strano,
no matter how strange it might seem, the hardest part is actually starting, in the sense, breaking the silence that we share is always hard. And I feel that this is a very precious moment, also because being being able to be together in silence is something special, something intimate that goes counter or against the current, let's say. We have this tendency to always need to produce and to do, to do things. There was one of my masters named Gelik Rinpoche. I wasn't actually there, but I was told by those who were that one day in the United States, he lived there. He met. It was a public conference in an important theater, which was very, very full. It was in New York, and he was together with a Hindu master, and they knew each other for many, many years. And it was a conversation between these two great masters. And to begin, they were there sitting on the stage, this very full theater. They looked at each other, and they stayed looking at each other without saying a word for about 45 minutes. Those who were there at the beginning, they felt the people were a little nervous, and then some whispers, what's going on. And then people started relaxing until that silence really was shared by everyone, and everyone relaxed. And after about 45 minutes, one says to the other, "I love you." And the other one answered, "I love you too." And then they began this beautiful conversation between them. So it said that even if they said marvelous things, the 45 minutes of silence one wasn't expecting to be sitting there in silence. And it wasn't the silence that comes from not knowing what to say, or some kind of discomfort, or not being able to say what one wants to say. It was a kind of silence that said much more than actually talking at that moment. One day I'll muster up the courage to stay longer in silence. Today we're here to do the ceremony for the taking of refuge. As human beings, using a different term, we're not lonely animals. We can say that we're animals from the pack. There are solitary animals here in these woods. For example, there are these small deer, and as soon as these small the fawn, as soon as they're able to eat by themselves, they stay by themselves. But we need to love and be loved. We need to give trust and be trusted. When we're in a situation where we don't feel safe, having someone that we can, someone that we can trust and that is present, and someone that has trust in us, that changes our relationship with ourselves. If someone doesn't trust us, that also would change our relationship with ourselves. And this is even more so when we have to go places that we don't know, places we've never been, where we don't feel safe, or we feel unsure. We don't know where exactly to go. Also, if I'm not able to see, but someone takes my hand and leads me along that path, and I know that I'm walking with someone who knows the way, that makes me feel a lot more sure. Sometimes it's not even being together, just knowing that there's someone who knows the way, is by my side. I can trust that person. That already makes an enormous difference. For some reason, in the times in which we live, we've followed a common tendency, this mechanism of the pendulum, where we go from one extreme to the other before we can find this middle way. And we started from a social, familial situation where where the families were very large and we shared everything, the life in the village, where privacy practically didn't exist at all. And it's interesting to see this culture that also in Tibet, it's changed a lot. But when I arrived in India, and I was living in a house with 4 people, I saw there was, I saw with the Tibetans, there was no such thing as respecting one's sleep. If he, for example, here, if somebody's sleeping and you arrive at night and that person's sleeping, you pay attention, no? You try not to turn on the light, make noise. And if you're sleeping and someone walks in and makes noise as if you weren't there, it would be bothersome, right? For Tibetans, no. At least where I lived, it was like this. Someone's sleeping, okay. Then he'll wake up and then he'll go back to sleep. What's the problem? Being used to living in so many, then there wasn't this problem. I remember calling someone in Tibet who was used to going to sleep at 8, 9 o'clock. I needed something. This was an old monk, and I called him, and his voice. It was 11 o'clock at night, and he would go to bed like at 8 because he'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I heard his voice, so a little groggy, and I said, I'm sorry, did I wake you? And he said, why are you excusing yourself? So these are cultures where the collective is more important. Instead, in our culture, we go more and more in the direction where we think that individualism brings happiness. So if I can have my space, do what I want, when I want, how I want, have what I want, when I want, how I want it, if I can personalize every single thing, then I'll be happier. And then on the other hand, we can see that one of the weakest points that we see within our society is a great level of solitude, loneliness. Even if we live in societies where there's a lot of people that share the same spaces in the cities, for example, we see and we interact with many people, but often with an inner state of loneliness. Because what we need more than anything is not this aspect of physically seeing each other and doing things together, but it's that feeling of loving and being loved. Giving and receiving, and trusting someone and feeling trusted. These are characteristics that are fundamental for our health as human beings. And there are exceptions. Some people who develop other characteristics and they're very happy alone without seeing or seeing anyone. I'm talking about very few people, actually, who are really well like this. And this has to do with many aspects of our life. When we talk about our spiritual path, it's said that the first step that's necessary to follow a spiritual path seriously, deeply, in a real way, jokingly a little bit, I say there are three levels. There's a spiritual tourist. There's the amateur, the spiritual amateur, and the professional. The tourist arrives, takes a couple pictures, and maybe has an experience here and there, and said, "Oh, I've been there." The amateur spiritual person, comes and takes a house, rents a house, but doesn't actually live the dynamics of the place all the time. It's like Venice. Visiting Venice is much different than living in Venice. And so the professional spiritual person lives there for better or worse, and sees all the aspects. The his reality is part of of every aspect. Usually, it's a gradual. I mean, you. It's not. It's you have to be tourist before you can be professional. It's not. It's. It's not a degenerate term. But the tourist goes, says, okay, this is nice. I take a little here, I take a little there. It's not degrading to say that it's that one is a tourist. The amateur instead plays the game as long as it's comfortable. So maybe it comes for a couple long weekends, stays a while, then goes back. Instead, the professional one says, I'm here with my entire being. So I take this path in all the aspects of my life, whether I'm meditating or in the temple or at work or at home, my personal choices, political choices. So my spiritual path impermeates all aspects of my life, and it's always included. This is one is not running away from oneself anymore here. It's said in the teachings that starting with Atisha, here represented to my right with the red hat, that larger image with the red image, that's the representative of Atisha Timpankara. He was one of the most important masters of Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism. He was born in Bangladesh, or present-day Bangladesh. And he went to the monastery Vikramashira, and it's a very long story. One day we will tell the story. After a very long story, he got to Tibet. The king wanted to bring an important Indian master in Tibet, and he did a kind of fundraising. I mean, imagine Tibet was kind of seen as a barbaric land. Imagine today, for example, a very important university one arrives from a faraway land and a very, very small school and asks for the highest level professor. Asks if the highest professor can come back to that land. The answer would be no. We say, wait just a minute. So the slyness of this Tibetan king, he said, we need to do fundraising so that we can show that we have the necessary means. Because if we come with a huge offering, they will think that we have the necessary conditions to support such a master. But then one day, what happened was he went to a small kingdom, which at the time it was kind of feudal kingdoms. And once he was there, this other king, absolutely against Buddhism, he actually imprisoned him and sent a message to his nephew saying, if you want your king uncle alive, you need to bring back his own weight in gold. And so another fundraising started to save the king. And when he got there, the nephew, they weighed. They were also feeding him, the king. So actually he maybe he had gained weight when he was there, but they said it's enough what you've brought to the nephew. What you brought is enough to get your uncle back, but without his head. And so the king said to his nephew, he said, I've done what I needed to do. What's more important than my life, what's more important is that Buddhism can come to Tibet. So take what you gathered for to save me, and offer it to Atisha, and tell him that you're offering not just this gold, but I'm offering my own life for him to come. And so Atisha, at a certain point, he had this commitment with Janju was the name of the nephew. So the nephew took a commitment with the abbot of the monastery that he would have brought Atisha back after 3 years. But in the meantime, there was a war. And Atisha, when he was in Tibet, he wrote a book called The Path That Illuminates the Path, that clarifies the path. The path, the graduated path to enlightenment. Janju. The lamp that clarifies the path to enlightenment. So he sent that to the abbot, and the abbot said he would have never written such an important text if he had stayed here. So he gave his permission to Atisha to stay as long as he wanted in Tibet. And in the end, he ended up staying 12 years. So he took these teachings that were taken for granted in India, and given that in Tibet, Buddhism was, let's say, relatively new. So he wrote down the step by step, things that were taken for granted in India, and he wrote a manual, the step by step manual. And then the masters who came after him went into more detail, up to Lama Tsongkhapa, also represented here to my right. The yellow hat, the founder of our Gelupa lineage, and he wrote the Lamrim Chenmo, the great graduated path to enlightenment, where he wrote a very extensive manual to reach enlightenment, very specific. And just a little advertising here. This next year, I've programmed a course, a series of teachings on the Lamrim. I don't know how many weekends. Next week, at least 8 meetings, and the year after, little by little, so we should take this fundamental teaching, this manual, this step-by-step manual. Then we start with step 1, and gradually we explain up until the end. The first step, it says, the first necessary steps to actually enter the practice seriously and to walk a spiritual path is to entrust oneself correctly to a spiritual guide. That first necessary step is to not be alone anymore. If I'm somewhere and I want to walk, but I don't know the road, and my eyes are closed and I can't open my eyes, the first step is to find someone who can give me a hand and help me walk, the example that's given. If we want to learn anything at all, let's say we want to learn carpentry. This is also this is also the traditional example. Maybe it was more common in Tibet at the time. If you want to learn carpentry, you need someone to teach you, right? I mean, you can try by yourself, and then people say, "No, I've taught myself. If I have all these manuals and I use YouTube. I've taught myself." No. You're self-taught if you start with the tree in front of you. Then you to do it yourself, really do yourself. Instead, everything else that we want to learn, we use the experience of those who've come before us. And one of the characteristics that we have, a marvelous characteristic we have, not just human beings, but also other beings, other animals have this ability to receive, gather up experience and knowledge of those who've come before us, who have added it to the information that they had received and inherited. Otherwise, we have to follow the trial and error method. You know, okay, try, it works well, we'll move on. Try, it doesn't work, okay, try again. If we had to do that for everything, we would be... I mean, most of us wouldn't even be able to make fire and heat the house, or get warm. We'd be like cavemen. So anything we need, when we learn how to read or write, or we want to study literature or medicine, music, dance, regardless of what it is. And the same thing happens in the along the spiritual path. Along our spiritual path, we receive knowledge, experience that has been accumulated, elaborated over centuries, and that has been then handed down to us. And an enormous importance in Tibetan Buddhism. I say Tibetan Buddhism because it's the one that I know, and surely it's present in other traditions, but I can't talk of what I don't know. This importance of learning and practicing and following a path within an uninterrupted lineage. So when we learn something, when we, whether it's from the philosophy or conduct or meditation, it's fundamental for us to receive that, not just the conceptual part of the technical explanation, but there's a part of trust and love. Because when someone teaches us something, for example, at school, what the teacher transmits is not just the technical content, but also faith in the one who's learning. I don't know how many of you have had the experience of having an important teacher, that someone that trusted you, and maybe you were in a situation where you weren't sure if you were able to, if you could manage the situation, and then that figure gave you that extra push and that trust. And so what we take from someone who guides us is knowledge, but the difference, there's a difference between, we say Gegen in Tibetan and Lama, these two different terms. Gegen means teacher. Genla, Gegen is teacher. And someone who has the job, the role of transmitting knowledge. Someone goes and goes there and he explains the content. Lama is the translation of guru in Sanskrit. It's a spiritual guide. It's also called Kalyana Mitra. Oh, Gewe Shenyen. It means virtuous friend in Sanskrit or in Tibetan. This virtuous friend has the role not to teach. The relationship isn't based on teaching, but the main role of the guru is to bless us. What does that mean, to bless us? It means to interact with us physically, verbally, mentally, in such a way that it helps us create the conditions so that we can walk well along our path. Is the difference clear between the two? Like what we said before, a teacher at school. There can be a teacher at school who's very good at explaining the theory and the technique, but there's the then there's the missing maybe this feeling, this connection, or maybe there's someone who didn't teach us much tangibly for teachings, but actually transmitted so much. Like Ken Lakpala, for example, I received only one formal teaching where he said, "Oh, I'll explain something to you," which was actually the four seals. Once he gave me these teachings, not because he didn't have knowledge, because he had a different role. He was like a father for me. We lived together, and he taught me so much with his presence, with by his example. And along the spiritual path, we need this relationship of love and trust to receive blessings, this virtuous interaction that helps us move things within, that helps us walk along our path. And here, this is what we call lineage. There are two types of lineage. There's a lineage that transmits knowledge and another lineage that transmits experience, and they're both important. So from one side, when I explain the Four Noble Truths, I don't make up the fifth, or I take one away because I don't agree with it. We explain things in the same way that I received them from my master, who received them in that same way from his master, all the way to Buddha Shakyamuni. So this is for it to be alive, this uninterrupted lineage. The one who explained it needs to have had his own experience, a real, true experience. This makes a huge difference. So then I receive it, and then I have my own experience before I hand it down. So the taking of refuge is when we entrust ourselves to a path. It's said that when we take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but the actual refuge is the refuge in the Dharma. The Buddha, or the Guru that represents, is who transmits the Dharma, who accompanies us, and the Sangha. Sangha. The spiritual community is more maternal than paternal, and so it should be, in my mind, a feminine article, la Sangha in Italian, and not il Sangha, even if they tell me that's grammatically incorrect. Why should we entrust? Because when we want to do something that we don't know what it is, we want to walk a path that we don't know, we need, first of all, we need to make sure that the one who's leading is someone that we can trust. And for that reason, traditionally, before trusting a tradition, a lineage, a master, one should experience or get close to that master for at least 12 years to be absolutely sure. And once you're sure, that one needs to practice like one makes a stone soup. Stone soup means, there's this story, there's a monk who leaves his village to go to central Tibet to study, which was very common in Tibet. About 3 or 4 months of travel to get there, and on foot. So maybe he spent 25, 30 years there, and then becomes someone very well learned. Goes back to his small village to see his family. when he got there, he found his mother and saw that she was very, very poor and didn't have much at all, but physically was quite well. And he asked, what are you eating?" He said, "Well, I'm eating stone soup." Once a master came through the village and he taught me this mantra, and with these stones I'm able to make this with these stones I'm able to make this stone soup and eat very well. He, being a very learned monk now, he went to find this dharani in the sutras of Buddhas. A dharani is not a mantra; it's a kind of spell. And there are two volumes only of spells among Buddha's sutras, and he found it. And he said, "Oh, it does exist," but he saw that his mother was reciting it with the wrong pronunciation. So he went to her and he said, "It's wonderful that you're doing this, but you're not reciting it well. Here, you need to recite like this and that, and to do it well, you need to do it like this." She said, "Okay." And then he went to find other people. He came back after a week, and then he came back and she was all thin and weak. He said, "What happened?" She said, "My stone soup is not coming out anymore like before." And he realized that by correcting her, he corrected doubt, uncertainty in herself, and she lost the faith that she had in herself. And understand that, he said, "Oh no, let me just check again." And then he pretended that he went to go see the text, and he came back to her and he said, "Mom, I made a mistake. What you were doing was perfect." Um, um, and then herself she believed in herself again, and she was able to make the soup. So once we take refuge, after we see and we check and recheck, but once you take refuge, you don't need to check again or have any kind of doubts, because that would block one's own spiritual path. That's why, generally speaking, before taking refuge, there's no hurry. There's not a specific number where people say, "Oh, can I take refuge now?" 2 years have passed, 5 years have passed, 10 years have passed. No, that doesn't determine anything. What determines it is our own inner state and what we've experienced. It's very common, for example, when someone gets close to Dharma, one falls in love, and then there's the moment of crisis, and then one finds the stability in one's own path. And that crisis is also important, because at the beginning there's a kind of idealized image of how things are, but then after that crisis and one finds that stability, one is more mature. Like with a relationship with somebody else, at the beginning there's a love at first sight, or the falling in love, but maybe it's not a very stable relationship. And after that initial crisis, then we can find a more stable relationship. And before getting married, it's better to have a crisis. No, it's not that you meet someone, you like each other, and you take a vacation together, and then you get married. No. Okay, fine to take a vacation, but you also need a lot of experience, etc. Maybe it works for some, it depends, but maybe people are together for 20 years and then they get married and it doesn't work. But it's important for us to have the experience. And in the taking of refuge, it's not a rule of what can and cannot be done. It's something that has to do with the faith that we have. How ready are we to entrust ourselves into this path? How ready are we to put ourselves in the game? So the taking of refuge should be done with seriousness. Or one says, "Okay, here I am. I want to follow this path in every aspect, as a spiritual practice, as a direction for my life. I trust. I've tried, I've retried, I've seen, I've looked for mistakes. I've looked for things that weren't going well. Like when Buddha said, you shouldn't do something simply because I said so. You should take what I tell you and 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 analyze it the way you do with gold, you know. Today, if you need to buy gold, maybe you go, I don't know, I've never had to buy gold, but today, if one wanted to buy gold, I imagine that you go to a bank. Anyway, and then you've certified, you get some kind of certification. But at the time of Buddha, if you wanted to buy gold, what would you do? You'd have to scratch it, burn it, to make sure that it was actually gold all the way through and not just copper dipped in gold. And Buddha says you should do the same with my teachings. Analyze, look, and if you see that there's something deep there within, then put into practice and take it. Otherwise, leave it. In the taking of refuge, we trust ourselves spiritually in a path. The person or the people who guide us along this path, because let's remember that when we take refuge, you can take refuge with more than one master, not just with one. Lama Tsongkhapa, he had more than 100 masters of different traditions even. I have 20 or so masters, 25 about. We can have someone who guides us one aspect of the path and on a philosophical aspect or a specific practice, but the path is one. But along the path that we walk, the more we take refuge in the Dharma, in the path, then we can have more masters. When we're not ready to take refuge in the Dharma, actually, but we take refuge in the person who gives us refuge, then the fewer teachers we have, the better it is. I don't know if that's clear. That's why it's very important that this aspect, that the actual refuge of the Dharma, one is mature. It's a mature refuge. So I have great respect for the path that I'm walking, and to walk it well, I need help from many. So maybe one, I'm on a trip and someone helps me with my visas. Another one helps me with the language. Everyone can help us. The different masters help us with different aspects of the path. But when we have certainty of the path itself, then we find guides where we least expect them, if we have the opening, if we're open for this. And I put emphasis on this because sometimes people ask me, Lama, can I take refuge with more than one master in different traditions? More masters? Sure. Different traditions also, but certain traditions don't allow for you to take refuge in different traditions. We remember Atisha when he said, respect deeply every spiritual tradition and follow with determination the one that you prefer. On my side, on the side of Lama Michel Rinpoche, there's no problem. So you can follow different traditions, but they need to match. There needs to be coherence among them. So it's also possible to take certain aspects of a tradition. We should have stability along our path. when we have this opening, we can have different masters. No problem. There's no problem. For example, I had an experience, and every once in a while I tell this story because it touched me really deeply. Once I was on the beach. So to make a long story middle short, I end up in a faraway beach after 45 minutes driving, like an hour walking, far away beach, and I find this man, maybe around 50, dark-skinned man, who was there standing selling coconut. I really like coconut, so I asked him for one. I asked how much it was, and around, but more in the more tourist areas, it was extremely expensive. But here, it was really fair. And I thought, I'm here in the middle of nowhere. I thought at the beginning, oh, who knows how much this is going to cost? But it was incredibly fair. So the conversation was, can I have a coconut? How much does it cost? What's your name? And his name was Michel, which is not a very common name. But what touched me so much is when I was in front of this man, I was blocked. He touched me deeply by his presence. In that very brief conversation, he was able to teach me to transmit something very deeply that helped me tremendously afterwards. He was able to transmit this combination of dignity and humbleness together in a way that I've seen, that I've rarely seen. And it deeply touched me. And I have tremendous gratitude for him. And when I asked his name, I had this attraction towards him. I didn't want to go away, and I asked him his name. There I was for that short time. And if we look at the antique text, we would have said the Lama went to the beach and there was an emanation of a Buddha, or, there selling coconut, etc. But the point is, that man, Michel, he transmitted something important to me for my path, something important to me, for which I have tremendous gratitude. And if we have the right openness, we can receive from many, many people in many different contexts. And this attitude of openness is incredibly important to be able to learn, to receive. And of course, there'll be certain people that are more key, defined as our root guru, for example. Atisha Dimpankara, he had many masters, but every time his root guru was named, when any master was named, he would put his hand at his heart. But then when his master from Indonesia was named, he would put his hands at his head, on his crown. And one day he was asked, "You have taught us to have respect to all masters. Why do you make this distinction?" And he said, all masters are of the same nature, in the sense that we shouldn't see one better or worse than the other, but there's always one called the root guru who touches our heart more deeply. And there's a special gratitude, not that he has a different quality, but the conditions are different. And so with those different conditions, our heart is touched more deeply. So we can have a tremendous amount of connection with other masters, for sure. But let's remember that our refuge is mostly in the Dharma, in our own path. And when we take refuge, when we can entrust ourselves to this path as explained, as transmitted and handed down by Buddha Shakyamuni in an uninterrupted lineage within this tradition. So I trust I entrust myself to this lineage and to those who help me. The teachings, all the methods, the practices, there are many things together that help me along my path. The refuge actually comes within one's heart. You can take refuge 50,000 times, but if it's not within one's heart, it's not there. You can also do it once or not actually ever formalizing it and have it deep within your heart. So now we're going to formalize this taking of refuge. And let's remember that this is something that should be renewed, and that then it becomes more stable. The farther along we go along the path, the more experience we have, the more trust we have, the more we're able to touch on that trust and faith, then our refuge becomes more and more mature. Personally,
se dovessi cercare di rispondere alla domanda come mai mi trovo,
if I were to ever have to answer the question, how did I get here? I wouldn't know what to say. I don't think that I have who knows what kind of special different qualities. I know many people who are even more able than me. But for some strange reason, life has brought me to this role of sharing. And I remember always what Lama Michel Rinpoche said to me in two different times. Once we were just at the entrance of his house. It wasn't any kind of formal moment. As we were getting in or out of the house, I don't remember, he said to me, remember, our role, making reference to himself and to me, he said, is to serve. We're here to be at the service, to be at, and what stayed in my head, there's this expression in the land of the blind, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So I don't know why, but I've been able in this lifetime to dedicate my life to studies. I have a good predisposition within, fourth Dharma practice. So here I am walking my path, and those who want to join me, please, you're welcome. It's not I've already arrived, and if you want to come. No, we're learning and growing together. I have deep gratitude to everyone who has helped me along my path, because one of the greatest things about being able to teach, to guide, is being able to share without having this expectation of being something. For me, I have this attitude of being at the service, to help, to help you get to where you go. I mean, you can't help someone. You can't take someone where you have not been yourself, a path that you don't know yourself. So I've had many experiences, many special masters, not the greatest knowledge of Buddhism that exists, but there's something for sure is there. We're here together to walk together, and so this commitment on my side is to offer what I have in the best way possible, and the commitment of those who would like to take refuge is to do your best. It's a commitment of love, of transparency, of trust. When we take refuge, it's also important to remember the context. For example, if I take refuge in my dentist, because you're there with your mouth open, you trust him, don't you? Or her, yeah. Before you open your mouth for something so important, you try to at least see his credentials, to see others what their experiences have been, right? Or maybe you haven't filled a small cavity before a root canal. Before doing something really important, you try. But once you have tried and it's gone well, then you trust him, and you need to really trust. And that's just for your teeth. You trust him for your teeth. It's not that you trust him for every aspect of your life. You trust him. You say, "Help me with my teeth." And along the spiritual path, what is our context? We're talking about our spiritual path. So a spiritual guide can also be our friend. There can be many different kinds of exchanges. He can wear many different hats. But when we trust ourselves to a spiritual guide, we're talking about these qualities to guide us along our spiritual path. So a specific reason as to why I'm here, I do not know. But life has brought me here, and I've had this role since being very, very young, to transmit and to teach, and I've always done it with tremendous joy. I receive so much, also because I see that it brings benefit and gives meaning to my life. So what I said this morning, I really believe in you, because the only reason why the teachings have been given by Buddha and transmitted and handed down generation after generation to Lama Ganchen, to me, and now me to you, is the trust that I have in you, the belief that I have in you. And with this, I conclude. A few years ago, I was asked to teach Tibetan. And as I was giving the Tibetan lesson, I realized something that I didn't know, that I have very, very little patience for teaching, but really very little patience. So after reading and writing Tibetan, after I repeated the alphabet 3 times, it's up to you to study, or we need to study together, or I need to study for you. If I've explained the 4 grammatical points that are super simple, I've explained everything. Now it's up to you to study. In 1 weekend, I explained everything. I was done. And then if you want to learn, you need to study. But I saw that I just didn't have any patience. I said, okay, I've understood. Those who understand, understand. Otherwise. So I transmitted this knowledge, and I was done. I mean, you take the video, watch it, in slow motion, watch it again and again and again, study. Instead, along the spiritual path, the role is different. The role is to walk together. Once we walk, as we're walking together, if you repeat that thing 100,000 times, that's fine, because there's no expectation for that person to be already arrived. So what we do often, it's not teaching. It's an analytical meditation together, where we go by, we review things that we already know, but we're just creating more familiarity together. So of course we're also transmitting things, but this walking together is very important for me, and I imagine it's also important for those of you who are walking this path. Now, before we formalize the taking of refuge, I just want to explain that when we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, we take refuge from something. We take refuge from the cycle of samsara. We take refuge because we don't want to continue to live in this context of jealousy and envy, ignorance, selfishness, anger, and the suffering that all brings. And to get out of the cycle of suffering, the so-called samsara, it doesn't matter where I go, as long as I'm taken by ignorance, attachment, hatred, anger, then I'll keep suffering. So I recognize that I want to get out of this, and I need to do that. I need to change my deepest habits, and I need help for that. So to practice the Dharma, I need someone to show me the how. So I take refuge in the Buddha, who shows me the Dharma, the actual refuge, and the Sangha, the spiritual community, and company along my path, and the Guru, who is the embodiment of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Buddha Shakyamuni said that he will always be present. He'll be present for those who want to follow the path in the form of the spiritual guide. Buddha never left anything written. What was transcribed about 300 plus years after his death was based on oral teachings. And when they realized that these oral teachings and transmissions were starting to diverge a little bit, then they wrote them all down. So this aspect of love and trust is enormously important. One last thing. There are many ways that we can entrust ourselves to a spiritual master, spiritual teacher. You can have a daily, close relationship. There's some contexts where a master has very, very few disciples and they live together. I mean, there are different contexts. The master of Lama Ganchen, Chögyam Rinpoche, and his master, Pabonka Rinpoche, there were times he would go one place in Tibet and thousands of people would receive teachings, and they would then continue to practice those teachings and enrich that relationship based on that one meeting. So having seen their root guru only once in their lifetime, what gave worth, what made their practice special was putting into practice what they received and not seeing the actual person daily. As I said before, the taking of refuge is this moment where we formalize this very serious commitment with this tradition, which doesn't exclude others, but it's a deep commitment within this tradition. There's commitment of reciprocal faith and trust. A commitment of love, and as I said before, it's something that you should do when you feel it. And so sometimes people say, "Oh, Lama, forgive me. I didn't feel like taking. Feel like taking refuge." What do you mean, excuse me? So thank you that you had the sincerity with yourself to say, "I don't think it's the right time." It's maybe the following day, the next following time, you will, but you should never feel obligated. And one characteristics that we have here at this center that I've seen this also with the summer camp with the children. It was really nice that this showed up with the kids too. It's a context where everyone can be themselves, respecting each other, but where there isn't any problem of judging or feeling judged. And the last thing that I would ever want is that someone would take refuge because, okay, everyone's doing it, and if I don't do it, I'll be out of place. No, absolutely not. So now, I wanted to give as happens often, I wanted to give a very brief explanation, and instead, I let myself go. So let's get right to the formal part of the taking of refuge. If you're taking it for the first time, you take it. If you've already taken it and you've upheld your commitments and you regenerate, you renew and refresh, let's say, your commitment. So if you like to do that, to take refuge for the first time or renew your commitments, you can stand up and make 3 prostrations. Then sit down with your right knee on the floor and your left up. I'll show you the position now. It would be like this. This is the position of request. So once someone told me, Lama, I didn't take refuge because this position hurts my knee. Don't worry. If you don't feel comfortable like this, you can stay seated in a chair. But this is following a little bit tradition. But if you're uncomfortable physically like this, you can sit in any way that's more comfortable for you. Visualize above me. There's my own root guru, Lama Michel Rinpoche. Above him, there's his root guru, Kyabchen Chichen Dorje Chang, and above him, Kyabchen Paponka Rinpoche, Dechen Nimpo. And above him, his master, all the way to Buddha Shakyamuni. We dedicate a sincere wish to get out of our own cycle of suffering. We observe the world around us, all the other beings. We desire deeply and sincerely that every being reaches happiness and is able to live in peace. And we generate a deep and sincere desire to do our best to help every being reach that state. And the best that we can do for that is to develop our own qualities, gradually get out ourselves from the cycle of suffering of samsara so that we can help others do the same. And so with this intention, we ask for help to the Buddha. We take refuge in the Buddha who shows us the path. We take refuge in the Dharma, the actual path, the teachings, the methods, the practices, our own spiritual practice. We take refuge in the Sangha, the spiritual company during our path. We take refuge in the Guru, the embodiment, and in flesh and bones of our own path, and the embodiment of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So with that sincere and deep intention to follow to follow this path and to take refuge in the Guru, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So just like each lineage master took refuge in the past and upheld their commitments and practiced the path, reached in realizations, in that same way, I want to do the same here today. Repeat after me the request or the taking of refuge.
Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. Dutiyam Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Dutiyam Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. Dutiyam Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. Tirtiyam Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Tirtiyam Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. Tirtiyam Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. Namo Gurubhye, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sangaya. Namo Gurubhye, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sangaya. Namo Gurubhye, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sangaya. Namo Triratnaya. Sangye Chodam. Tsogi Choknabla. Jancho Pardo. Dani Kyapsuchi. Dagi Jinsok. Gibe Sonamgi. Drola Penchir. Sangye Drubrasho. Nel Buddha nel Dharma.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment with the practice of generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment with the practice of generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Mahamuni, Shakyamuni, Swaha. Om Muni Muni, Mahamuni, Shakyamuni, Swaha. Om Muni Muni, Mahamuni, Shakyamuni, Swaha.
Now I will ask you in Tibetan, Tabino, which means this is the method, this is the path, and where we formalize the taking of refuge with these questions, and you answered Lexo, which means excellent. And then I snap my fingers, and from that moment, the taking of refuge is formally done. So I ask you, Tabino, you answer Lexo. You can sit now normally. Let's recite the taking of refuge together now, together. visualize that each one of the lineage masters, starting from Buddha Shakyamuni, they come, they absorb one into the other until they absorb into Lama Ganchen Rinpoche, who absorbs into my own heart at a lotus flower at my heart chakra. And um, as we take refuge, light rays and nectar, white, red, blue, yellow, and green in color emanate from my 5 chakras and absorb into your respective chakras, from my crown, throat, heart, navel, and secret chakra, giving the blessings of body, speech, and mind, qualities, and action.
Dharmam sharanam gacchami, Sangam sharanam gacchami, Dutiyam Buddham sharanam gacchami, Dutiyam Dharmam sharanam gacchami, Dutiyam Sangam sharanam gacchami, Tirtiyam Buddham sharanam gacchami, Tirtiyam Dharmam sharanam gacchami, Tirtiyam Sangam sharanam gacchami. Namo Gurubhye, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurubhye, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurubhye, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Triratnaya. Sangye chedan tsoke chenamla, chanchu pardo dani kyapsuchi, dagi jinso sonam ki, drola penchira sangye, drupar sho sangye cheda, soki chonamla, chancho pardo dani kyapsuchi, dagi jinso gipe sonam ki penchir sangye druparashu.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha.
From the depth of our hearts, we take the commitment to follow the Dharma in every moment, and we ask Guru Buddha and the aspect of our own Guru, inseparable from every Buddha and every lineage master, to stay here and to guide us with the Dharma, with every thought that we have, every choice that we make, every word that we say, to guide us along our lifetime, at the time of our death, in the bardo, and in all of our future lives. Guru Buddha smiles at you, and an emanation from my heart goes towards your crown, enters into your crown through your central channel, and sits joyously at your heart. That way,
Dagi chiwara pede tenshola kadrin chembe gone jesonte kuson toge ngodro tsedo so panden sawe lama rinpoche dagi drimbra pede tenshola kadrin chembe gone jesonte chodan tumo ngodru tsedu so panden tsawe lama rinpoche dagi ninkara pede tenshola kadrin chembo gone jesonte chanchu nimbe pardo temparashu.
your body, speech, and mind on a subtle level becomes inseparable from those of Guru Buddha, and you experience a state of infinite inner space full of joy and love.
Pakyuke sungdan dagi nga pakyuke tukdan dagi yin ten yerme chiktu chingi lo makyuke kudan dagi lu makyuke sungdan dagi nga tukdan dagi yin ten yerme chiktu chingi lo.
Guru Buddha remains joyously at your heart, in a state of joy and peace and inner bliss. We take the commitment to practice the Dharma, keep our commitments pure, to bring the practice to every place and every moment, to do everything we can to help other beings. We dedicate all of our virtuous actions that we've generated to the happiness and the well-being, to the peace of every being.
Drove munsel tatu ne gyur chi kewa kuntu yanda lama dan drame cheki pela longche chi sadan lamge yunten rabzo ne dorje change kopa nyurtop sho nimo dele tsendele nime kunyan delek shing Nintzen takto delek pe kuncho sumki chingi lop Kuncho sumke ngodrubutsol, kuncho sumke trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. In this way, we conclude the taking of refuge. Lama Michel Rinpoche every once in a while would say in English, see you sometimes, see you all the time, see you any moment. And it's also to remember that what makes two people close is that their hearts and their minds are going in the same direction. So the physical distance is quite relative. We're here following the same path, and this brings us close. And so in any moment when you can connect just by thinking, this happens on many levels. So someone might feel that they live far away, or and this changes. That changes on a superficial level. It's nice to be together, and if you have the opportunity, you should come. But that's not what determines our path and our closeness. That's all for today. Tomorrow we will start this week of teachings and practice and trying to get close also to the aspects of nature and to try to respect also tradition that for many centuries practitioners went to practice in nature, in the forests, in the mountains, in the desert, and instead we're always taking teachings here inside. So being outside has a particular quality, and so we'll do this. So those who have taken refuge for the first time, you can come now, and I will give you a name. The name is something that it means on one side. It means being born within a spiritual family. It means that you've generated a new identity for yourself, and that you can remember your own commitment. All the names are beautiful. Sometimes people ask why this name. I don't know. And the name those who have already taken refuge within this lineage, with Lama Michel Rinpoche, for example, I will not give another name because that's already happened. You don't need to repeat that and collect names. Um, Sometimes people insist, but generally speaking, this is how it's done. So I thank you tremendously. If someone would like to come and quickly say hello, that's fine too. But please, those who have taken refuge for the first time, please come up for your name.